You're welcome to the Friends at Work podcast with Ade Toye, the podcast about emotional intelligence at work. Hi, I'm Ade Toye. This is the first of the series of Women at Work profiles on this podcast as we celebrate Women's History Month this month of March. Today, I'll be sharing with you my conversation with Melanie Grant, a woman of many talents who explore her story from starting out being a flight attendant with Air New Zealand and eventually getting a PhD in Cancer Immunotherapy despite years of not believing she was good at science. We explore her experiences in the workplace across 3 continents, and she shares valuable insights on the immune system and how to stay healthy. Here's our conversation.
Hi, Toye. I'm Melanie Grant, and I am from New Zealand, as you can probably tell from my accent. And I moved with my lovely husband from New Zealand to Washington, D.C. Almost 18 months ago now. And what brought us from New Zealand to DC was the fact that I got a job at Children's National Medical Center. I had recently completed my PhD in Cancer Immunotherapy, and so now I am working in research at the hospital.
Nice. So have you always been in, you said cancer immunotherapy?
That's
How
correct.
did you get into that field?
Well, that was a long and winding road. So I think I probably was born a scientist, but that aspect of my life and my personality wasn't fostered, shall we say. It wasn't promoted. I was born into a blue-collar family, and so I'm the first in my family to have gone to university, much less gone on to get a higher degree. And I think really to a certain degree, when I sort of started exhibiting these interests, my family was kind of like, huh? She wants to do what now? So back in high school, I really loved biology. And the high school situation in New Zealand is you have compulsory subjects for the first 3 years, and then for the remaining 2 years of high school, you can choose. You can ditch math, you can ditch English, you can ditch science. Any of those kind of core curriculum subjects. And so in this third year of core curriculum, I really enjoyed biology, but didn't do well in chemistry or physics. And so I wanted to do biology in that 6th year, and my high school teacher advised me, you should stick to arts, dear. And
Wow.
I was a good little girl who's very obedient and respectful of authority, and thought, wow, this is my high school science teacher. He must know more than I, so I better do arts. And so I did dumb stuff like economics and photography, and I was bored out of my little brain. And it took me 16 years I went off to university, did the first year of an arts degree, and just kind of didn't grab me, I guess. And so it took me 16 years before, via a circuitous route, I ended up doing a science degree, going back to school in my 30s and doing a science degree and going on to get a PhD in cancer immunotherapy.
Wow. So what were you doing before you got into this?
Right. So my first career, I was a flight attendant.
Wow.
For Air New Zealand. I flew around the world and got paid to do it,
Nice.
which was one of my life goals. Kind of thought that I'd be doing something more important than just serving tea or coffee, but hey, I was flying around the world and getting paid to do it.
Nice.
And
How long were you a flight attendant?
9 years.
Wow, that's a long time.
Yeah, it was a good job, paid well, so I stayed with it. But ultimately, what happened was I got bored, and so I was casting about for something to do, and I studied a small business course while I was still flying. So I would be perched up in the business class. I had, looked after all my business class passengers and put them to sleep for the night. And of course, I had to stay awake to make sure everyone was okay and serve them tea and cookies should they so desire. And so I would pull out the books and study down the back of in the galley. And that led to us opening our first business, which was a small retail importing business. And from there, I had wanted to live in the Northern Hemisphere ever since I was a young child. I just loved the idea of snowy Christmases and April showers do spring May flowers. Well, that doesn't happen in New Zealand. I wanted to experience, Easter with lambs and daffodils like it's supposed to be, and chickens and all those kind of things. And
like the British told you it was supposed to be.
That's right, yeah, because New Zealand's a British settler colony, and I had quite a British sort of upbringing.
Okay.
So after we got our business fully systemized and operational, I got bored. We're getting a theme here.
Yeah.
And so my husband and I moved to Scotland because I have British ancestry on my father's side. So we were allowed to go and live there. And didn't have a plan other than we just wanted to go live there. Just figured we'd get jobs when we got over there. And what we didn't realize was, in this modern era, if you don't have a degree or a ticket of some description, it doesn't have to be a degree, but like a electrical apprenticeship or plumbing or something, some ticket behind you, you can't get an interview, let alone a job. So that was a real eye-opener. So we spent 2 years in Scotland, and during that time I studied to become a nutritionist through a series of events that doesn't matter. I did.
Okay.
And I was getting close to getting my certificate, and friends in New Zealand who owned a natural health clinic phoned up and said, we would like a nutritionist in our clinic. Would you consider coming back to New Zealand? It was too good of an opportunity to pass by. So back to New Zealand, where I worked as a nutritionist, and this whole experience of working as a nutritionist and getting that very small certificate was what introduced me to science again, and gave me just enough confidence to think, ooh, maybe I could do science. I'm a big girl now. So I enrolled after I worked as a nutritionist for 2 years, and I kept bumping up against the limits of my knowledge, and my clients would ask me things, and I was like, I just don't have an answer for that. So I decided to go back to school, and that was when I enrolled to do a science degree.
Wow.
So I told you it was circuitous.
I love your story because I feel a lot of people don't get to start again or to find the thing that they love and actually get to do it and actually go down that path. And it's also really exciting to see that you worked in two very separate, they couldn't be more opposite.
You are so right.
One is people facing and the other is microscope facing.
Yes, yeah.
One is macro, the other is micro.
To micro.
It's just like, it's pretty interesting to see, the differences.
Yeah.
And that one human being has the capacity to go across both and to do something of value there, because getting a PhD in a science, talk less of, the way your specialty is, I think it's no small feat. And especially, as you say, coming from a blue-collar family where you were the first to actually go to university. So personally, I applaud that. I think it's a great accomplishment in itself. And so this is Friends at Work, and I will be remiss if I do not ask how would you say that the different relationships have been as someone who's worked in these two or in varied careers in different countries, actually on 3 different continents now. How have your experiences with workplace friendships and connections been? Can you compare and contrast?
Yeah, they have certainly been varied. My workplace friendships have varied a lot over the places that I've worked. So starting with Air New Zealand, where they were like sort of 2-day friendships or 2-week friendships, so every time you came to work, you worked with a new crew, and you kind of formed this instant bond around the fact that you were all there on the same tour of duty. You were going to fly to Sydney, then Los Angeles, then Frankfurt, then back to Los Angeles for a couple of nights, then to Tahiti, then, home, and however many days that took. And you needed each other for that time, and you needed to get along, and you did. And most of the time it worked really well. We had minimal, well, certainly in my experience, you kind of sussed out the people that you wanted to hang out with on your downtime, and the people that maybe, that's okay. You can go do your own thing. And so I met people who I worked with once in 9 years. And then there were other people who I had the fortune of, getting to work a few tours together. And because our schedules were just so disparate, it was, kind of hard to hook up when you weren't on a tour of duty together. But yeah, you were kind of like a little mini family as you journeyed around the world as a crew. Generally, I mean, in my experience, it worked really well. When someone had a problem, we all kind of helped out because we knew that it was just us. There was, we were all away from home, and we would just help each other out, and it was nice. And
have you kept in touch with some of those people? Or has it been difficult to keep in touch?
So now, Toya, you need to remember this was pre-internet. Well, actually, so email came online right towards the end of the time that I was finishing up as a flight attendant. And so when I first started flying, keeping in touch with my husband, I mean, I sent postcards home, and some of them didn't arrive till after I got back.
Oh, wow.
But then by the end, we were communicating by email. So I'd be in Los Angeles. I'd arrive in Los Angeles. I'd go and see if there was an email from Daryl. And sometimes we would send...
Daryl, your husband, right?
Oh, yes. Yeah, that's my husband. So sometimes we would communicate in, and I'm using the air quotes here, real time, where he would send an email and then I'd get it and send one back. I mean, we didn't have Skype or, instant chat, but this was as fast as it got.
Yeah, way before that time. Yeah.
Yeah, and you couldn't afford to phone. Because if I was away on a 2-week trip, then I might maybe phone maybe twice because it was so expensive.
Yeah.
So, very, very different era. And then, so we've had the experience of having very nice friendships with our employees when we owned our business. It was beautiful, actually. Just people that we really loved, and we were very fond of. They were fond of us. We were fond of them, and we have kept in touch with them. And we wanted to foster an environment where those employees knew that we cared for them as people first and foremost. So they were all mums with young children, and when we hired them, we said, look, if you're on deck at the shop and you get a phone call that your child is sick or needs you, shut the shop and go. That is your first priority, not this shop. So I don't know, I guess that maybe fostered a sense they knew that we cared about them as people first and foremost. And my goodness, they were so loyal and so, amazing people. And
That's
then
lovely.
Clients, not so much of a friendship relationship with clients as a nutritionist. And then now working with fellow scientists, I really enjoy the team science approach where there's multiple smart brains, focusing on the same project and trying to put a giant jigsaw puzzle together. That's kind of what it's like.
That's interesting. And I like how your story cuts across employee, employer, employee, in 3 different spheres of experience. And I enjoy talking with people who have, multiple perspectives on this issue. And I also know that you don't like to, because I know you. I know you don't like to talk about contrarian stuff, so I will not put you.
That's my husband.
I will not put you in that situation. But how have you, if you had to, how have you dealt with certain difficult relationships? If you can think of, whatever instance, if you were talking to you're a mentee, somebody you were mentoring, and you're saying, okay, you would come across this type of people at work and this type of difficulty, either because you are an immigrant or because you are a woman or because you don't have XYZ experience. This is how you deal with these kind of people, because this is how I've had to deal with them.
So something that I think that I found really helpful just recently, I was reminded of the personality types. And I was having a discussion with a colleague of mine about some of the issues, and we decided to have a look at there's a website, 16 personality types, and just refresh ourselves on the whole Myers-Briggs. And that was a good laugh. You know, we were reading about ourselves going, oh my goodness, yes, that's so me. And I have found it immensely helpful to understand why my personality type, why I do things the way I do. A lot of it is to do with my personality, and that's okay. And understanding someone else's personality type kind of gives a bit of grace and a bit of lubrication, I guess, for the relationship. When there's some niggles, you know, it helps you to see, well, they just don't see the world the same way as I do. And I mean, sometimes if it's an issue of discipline, that's a whole different, you know, matter. And I at my current position, I'm not in a position of supervising people, so I'm not, discipline is not my area. So I just have to negotiate those kind of day-to-day niggles. And so I do try and think, okay, what kind of personality type are you, so that I can better understand where you're coming from with that dumb approach that you're taking. Because, of course, it only seems dumb to me because it's, you know, they're not seeing the world through my lens. Does that kind of...
I like that. I think it's helpful. I have found it helpful personally also to be able to see things from the other person's, well, what I understand the other person's personality to be. And it helps to, at least mentally or psychologically, deal with the situation and not stress me out as much as, you know, if I did not see it, or like, how come you don't see this the way I see it?
Yeah.
Like, it might be inexperience, it might be personality, it might just be, you know, you're dumb. I'm sorry. I just wanted to put that out there.
Sometimes.
Sometimes. But hey, and sometimes the shoe's on the other foot too. I mean, if I'll be honest, I probably been the person who was dumb. So I also need to put that out there. So it's how life goes. But just being able to understand that people are different and we all approach life differently. I think that's the uniqueness of and the beauty of life, and makes life more enjoyable that way, or at least less stressful.
And I think it depends what your professional relationship is with the colleague that you're maybe having an issue with, you know, if it's your boss versus
a contemporary
or an underling. Yeah, I mean, I'm the sort of person who I'm kind of like, why can't we just all get along and work together towards this common goal? But it's just not that simple, unfortunately. So I think, taking some time to try and understand where the other person is coming from, and realizing, oh, actually, maybe they're not quite as dumb as I thought they were. They're just coming at it from a different perspective that I hadn't thought of.
Yeah. True. Yeah. And so I also know you speak more than one language.
Sí, señor.
So tell me, how many languages do you speak, and what are those languages?
So my mother tongue is English. I lived in Costa Rica for a year, so that was where I learned to speak Spanish. And I studied French at school and at university. So my French is a little rusty, but I can get by.
Nice.
Studied a little bit of German and much less Japanese. I did really enjoy learning languages when I was younger. And
were they useful for you in any of your careers?
So I was a Spanish language interpreter for Air New Zealand. We had a code share with LAN Chile, the national airline of Chile. So Air New Zealand would fly their passengers from Auckland to Papeete, and LAN Chile would take their passengers from Papeete onto Santiago via Easter Island. And so we had these Spanish-speaking people. New Zealand, as you may be aware, does not have a high percentage of Spanish-speaking people. So it was, very useful having Spanish language interpreters on those flights to help people fill out their customs form and make the public service announcements.
Do you remember any of your announcements in Spanish?
Damas y caballeros, bienvenidos a bordo.
What did you just
so forth. I said, ladies and gentlemen, welcome on board.
Nice. That's cool.
Aquí está su salida de emergencia. Here is your emergency exit.
Here. It's good to know that in your language.
That's right.
Absolutely. That's true. That's awesome. See? You're just full of surprises. You like so many layers to you. It's amazing. It's amazing. So let's delve deeper into immunology. I mean, I like a little bit of science myself. As you know, I have a background in applied science. All right. And how do you go to immunology? Like, why did you pick that? And maybe more importantly for me right now is, what is immunology?
So with regards to how did I pick it, I think it picked me for two reasons. One, my grandfather, my mother's father, died of cancer when I was 11 years old, and he was only 54 years old, and so that's really young.
Yeah.
Some of your younger listeners may not think that, but it's really young. And I distinctly remember the day he died and how I heard about it, and it had a really big impact on our family.
Yeah.
And I think it was about 2-year period. He died over a period of approximately 2 years.
Wow.
And
that must have been hard.
Yeah, it was a vivid period of my childhood. And I remember my mother getting into all things healthy, Laetrile, propolis, vitamin C, eat butter, don't eat margarine, don't eat butter, et cetera, et cetera. So just that whole health focus, my mother definitely had a big impact in that. And so the immune system, so immunology is the study of how our immune systems function with regards to us and our environment. So our interaction with what's commonly known as bugs or germs, which is something that immunologists never say. So viruses, bacteria, fungi, and also cancer, chronic disease, autoimmunity, those kind of things.
Wow. And so recently, early in the year, there was a really bad flu season here. And so educate me. I feel like somebody wearing 2 left feet on his, 2 left shoes with 2 left feet, all right, on this issue. And because I don't know that much.
That's very common. I hear that a lot about immunology, even from medical doctors.
Okay.
They hear immunologist and go, whoa.
Okay. So it's good to know.
It's not just you.
All right. So when I read up a bit about it, 2 words keep popping up: allergies and antigens.
Okay.
And as related to, potentially flu. I mean, I just looked a bunch of things up.
Right.
And can you talk a bit about those, and can you just straighten me out?
Okay. Yeah.
Where the link with all of these things are, and connect that with the flu if there's any connection.
So an antigen is anything that causes your body to have an immune reaction. So an antigen could be a protein from a peanut.
Okay.
You will have, there's crossover between the whole allergy and antigen scenario.
Okay.
So an antigen may cause an allergy, but not necessarily. So an antigen can be a protein. So some people are allergic to, they're allergic to dairy products, and it's usually the protein, the casein portion of milk that their body reacts to because it sees it as foreign and dangerous.
Okay.
And so it generates an immune response. Primarily, let's not go into the technical details. I was about to launch into the technical. We'll just keep
just,
it.
Just give a little bit of that. It might be helpful. I mean, a lot of people know a few of these things, but your technical detail may be what coalesces all this knowledge in a way that's meaningful.
So now allergies, and I am not an expert in allergies. So just like you have medical doctors who specialize, you have immunologists who specialize, and my specialty is cancer. So I can talk more to that than the specific nuances of allergy, but as someone who has a family history and has numerous people in my family, I'm kind of familiar with the allergy area on a personal basis as well.
Okay.
So celiac disease, that's another example. This is where people who are allergic to the protein in wheat called gluten, if they ingest that, it's not a lifestyle choice. Gluten literally acts like a poison inside these people, and what it does is it breaks off. So in your small intestine is lined with these tiny little hair-like things called villi, and when someone who has celiac disease ingests wheat gluten, their villi break off, and what that means is they can no longer absorb the nutrients from their food, and they get malnourished and they get sick. So there's sort of a bit of a misconception out there that a lot of people choose not to eat gluten for lifestyle reasons, and there are actually really good reasons to do that, which we won't cover today. But so you've got true allergy or true disease caused by a faulty immune response to something that's actually perfectly normal. Gluten in and of itself is not harmful.
Yeah.
But if you have this particular set of genes that makes you respond in this way to gluten, you get this nasty celiac disease situation. And now with regards to the flu, so the antigen that we're responding to in the flu is part of the viral. It's a protein of a virus, and this is a more ancient response. So we have evolved to recognize certain pathogens. Those are the bad guys that make us sick. And the flu is a virus. And so our immune systems, everyone's born with the ability to recognize the flu virus. It's just, we call them pathogen-associated molecular patterns. And your body sees it and goes, whoa, bad guy, got to deal to this.
All right, so we'll go on from there. And so I always have this, especially as someone who has worked as a flight attendant, I've had this crazy scenario in my head, if it's ever happened. How do people, have you ever had an emergency situation with somebody who was allergic to something? So this is a two-part question, might be, might not be related. Is it safer from your perspective for people to be in this enclosure in the middle of the air that you can't tell the driver?
Giant metal tube.
This metal tube in the air. You can say, please park. I need to get down here. Would you say it's safe enough for airborne allergens in that environment?
Okay, so I think what you're asking is what's the kind of the allergy load or the antigen load inside this enclosed metal tube in the sky compared to like our daily lives down on planet Earth?
Absolutely.
Terra firma?
Yes.
So the air that is recirculated through the cabin is HEPA filtered. It's highly filtered. So so a couple of things. One, back in the 90s, there was a ban on peanuts in airplanes.
Okay.
And this was because when you get individuals who are highly allergic to peanuts, if someone at the front of the airplane is munching on a bag of peanuts, they can release aerosols which contain the peanut protein into the air, which can potentially be breathed in by an allergic individual down the back of the plane, and they can have an anaphylactic reaction. So that was an important regulation that was brought in to protect people who are allergic. And so I don't know if you've noticed, but peanuts are no longer served on airplane. Certainly, at least in New Zealand. I don't know if that was the case in the States.
US. I don't know either, but they don't stop people from carrying peanuts on board too.
Very true. But as I mentioned earlier, we've got the filtered air. So my understanding is that really dampens down and makes the air very safe and very, people do worry about, I'm traveling, I'm going to get sick because I'm breathing all this air. I mean, there is a degree of mixing, people are breathing in and out as they're sitting, and you've got 400 people in a small space, but certainly they do recirculate the air so that to keep it fresh.
Yeah, it reminds me of a story that's making me laugh. That came out, was published about 2 weeks ago about a plane that landed, had to do an emergency landing because one of the passengers wouldn't stop farting.
Oh no! Are you joking? Oh my
gosh!
So
it caused an altercation between a passenger that was sitting next to this person, who kept telling the person to stop farting, and they would not stop farting, and they had to do an emergency landing.
Oh my
and
gosh.
I thought that was hilarious for many reasons, and. But I also felt sorry for the person farting because there's certain things you can't essentially
Well, that's right.
stop.
Depending on what that person had eaten prior,
Yes.
they don't have any control. If they've been eating a bunch of beans and their probiotics are producing a ton of methane, it's gonna come out and it's gonna be bad.
Yes, and someone doing that in this tin can. It's like,
that is very unpleasant.
Absolutely. So
Yeah.
I thought that was.
In terms of the risk of transmission, it really depends on who you're sitting close to. So if you've got someone behind you coughing, you're breathing in whatever they're coughing out. And if that happens to contain pathogens, you're breathing them in, and depending on your immune status and whether you've seen that antigen before. So if you are naive to that antigen, meaning that your immune system hasn't encountered it before, you're probably going down, and depending with whatever it is. But if your immune system has seen that particular variety of bug before, you might just get a few sniffles or, just a very mild response.
I mean, I guess this would also be true of being in a long bus ride or any container.
Absolutely.
So it's not limited to just planes. It could be on a train. It could be on a bus. So it's any enclosure with lots of people in it. It could even be in an auditorium.
That's right. Yeah.
So it's true.
I think, and so as an immunologist, the worst thing you can do is cough or sneeze on me. I'm like, oh man, this is bioterrorism. You just, so it's
because
great.
You're more aware of the potential.
That's right. You assaulted me with a bug. So I love how these days they're teaching the kids in New Zealand. I don't know if this is the case in the States, but in New Zealand they teach their kids to catch your cough, and they tell the kids to cough into their elbows, in the inner part of their elbows, not with their hands, because of course you cough or sneeze into your hand, and then you go and shake hands with the person. Hi, nice to meet you. Or you touch a door handle, and you are just spreading the love. So don't sneeze or cough into your hands.
That's not the kind of love I want. Just keep your love to yourself.
Exactly. And speaking of workplace love and sharing, if you're sick, stay home, please. As an immunologist, please, just stay home.
All right. So this month is Women's History Month, and I would be remiss if I did not ask you about your female role models.
Well, thank you. What a great celebration. So one of my biggest heroes, I guess, is very close to home, and that is my husband's grandmother, who is still alive. She is 96 years old.
Wow.
And she, up until the age of, I think it was 94 or 95, and in fact, she's still trying to continue her occupation as a tax agent. And the only reason she's not doing it full time for the 12 people that she was doing it, acting as a tax agent up until the age of 94, 95, is because sadly she is losing her sight to macular degeneration.
And what is that?
So that is where, in terms of the symptoms, a black area appears in the center of your field of vision, and this black area just gets bigger and bigger and bigger until all you see is black. So currently she can only see out in her peripheral kind of vision, and that makes it extremely difficult to look at Excel spreadsheets and read numbers and read books and see people's faces. So but yeah, just an amazing lady, an incredible example of service to people. She hasn't been paid for this, but she just loves helping people. So she was helping people with their end-of-year tax returns, people who have businesses, family members, people in need. She and her husband were very hospitable people. They took in 4 orphan boys when they were teenagers because they heard that these boys were going to be split up and sent to different orphanages. Just many, many things like this over the years. A strong supporter of missionary endeavors, and just a really lovely example of a loving Christian woman.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, so there's Eula Coppin. Big shout out to Eula Coppin. Lovely, lovely lady. Always kind and always very generous.
It's just lovely to hear.
And in the kind of wider perspective, I guess Amelia Earhart jumps out. I love that she was just this, she chased adventure and was just such a pioneer in the field of aviation, which is something that I'm interested in. Obviously, I've been a flight attendant, but I also would like to learn to fly myself one day.
Nice.
And just, I love, I hope I get to do that. I love her, her sense of adventure, and she died doing what she loved. The circumstances of that death being,
still a mystery.
Exactly. But she was just a great pioneer.
That's awesome. And so as we round off this conversation, I want to quickly go back to immunology and immune system, just to, as we end this. How can I build my immune system?
See, that's a very good question, Toye, because on a practical day-to-day level, I'm not sure you can. So,
do you mean to tell me that all this TV ads telling me that I can take X, Y, and Z tablet or pill or eat such and such a diet aren't helpful, or aren't as helpful as they say they are?
Probably the latter. They're probably keeping you healthy, and what I mean by that is keeping your body in a good place of homeostasis, maybe keeping you...
All right, homeostasis. I'm not going to get you go past that so quickly. Yeah.
Just equilibrium, everything functioning optimally, I guess.
Okay.
But so one of the things that people are kind of maybe a little confused about is when we encounter a pathogen, a bug, a virus, and we're feeling crappy, we're feeling, we've got a headache, we've got a fever, we are aching all over and just want to curl up in a ball and lie on the sofa and cry or feel sorry for ourselves. It's not actually the bug that's doing that. What you're feeling and experiencing is your immune response to the bug. So those aches, why they happen is these chemicals that we call cytokines, which just means a chemical that's made by a cell, and that's what hurts. And so you kind of have to make your peace with that and go, okay, thank you, immune system. I know you're hurting, but I know it's because you're doing a job. Fever is a really great way of killing off the very bugs that are trying to hurt you. Okay. So that's one of the first responses is our body cranks up the temperature to kill. It helps to kill the bug.
Wow.
So there's fever, there's the pains from the cytokines. We get shivers. So the shivers is what helps our temperature to go up. So you see what I'm saying? So people, when we've got a cold and where our heads are all stuffed full of mucus in our sinuses, the lovely drug companies sell us these sprays to get rid of the mucus, and it maybe dries up the mucus, but that's what our body is secreting to trap the bugs, to say, whoa, don't get in my nose and make me sick. So I feel like we have to just think a little bit about what we're doing when we're using these medications to eliminate the symptoms rather than just lie down, go to bed, and sleep it off. And you're actually going to get better faster. And
I mean, for some of these things, some of them may require an extra level, depending on
more serious, yeah.
Yes.
But like a cold, drink lots of fluids. Now, I can tell you one very simple tip: vitamin C. Now, back in the 50s, this amazing scientist called Linus Pauling made this observation that there was that vitamin C was useful. It shortened the duration and the severity of viral illnesses like a cold or like a flu. They didn't have the technology back then to know how or why, and it was kind of poo-pooed. But he actually ended up getting a Nobel Prize for something unrelated. But just very recently, like in the last, within the last 5 years, they now were able to understand the mechanism. And it turns out that when you increase your intake of vitamin C above a certain level, it alters your biochemistry in your body in favor of the immune response. So we now know that there is a scientific basis for this observation that Linus Pauling made 50 years ago. And just because he couldn't explain how it worked did not mean that it didn't work.
Yeah.
Right. So that's the one change that I have made is I now take a 1,000 milligram vitamin C tablet every day, not the chewable ones because that's going to wreck your teeth, and not the gummies because you don't need the sugar, and you're a grown-up, you don't need to have a gummy candy to get your vitamin C, just swallow a pill. And then if I do feel like I'm getting the symptoms of a cold or flu, which is very rare, I bump it up to 3,000, so three of those a day. And honestly, now N equals 1. That's a scientific way of saying I only have the observations from myself, but I feel that my experience of getting colds and flus has been less since I've been doing this. So there is one very practical, very simple, very cheap, because vitamin C, ascorbic acid, is very, very affordable. I think that's one practical step that you can take to just alter your biochemistry a little bit in favor of the immune response against viral illnesses. With regards to strengthening your immune response per se, your immune response responds to things that it has or has not seen and which it perceives to be foreign or dangerous. So when you're a child, you come across illnesses for the first time: chickenpox, measles, whooping cough, all those kind of things. A lot of them we are vaccinated against, and that's one way that we try and weed these illnesses out of the population by vaccinating. So we give a small dose of a safer variety of these illnesses to children who are building their immune response, and they then generate a small immune response, and that protects them. So in terms of strengthening this, I mean, it's kind of an on-off, yes or no. Either you have seen this bug before and therefore you have an immune response against it, or you haven't seen it and you just have to go through the process of building that response, which means the headache and the fever and the aches, and so that you can generate the antibodies and the T cells that you need to protect you in future, because you generate immune memory. There's another reason why vaccines work. Does that make sense?
It makes a lot of sense.
Now, there is one exception, obviously, and that is people who are immune compromised, okay? And it's a whole different category, which we're not talking about today. We're talking about just you and me, normal human people. So someone who's immune compromised, maybe who's born without the ability to make B cells or T cells, it's a
different story.
It's a whole different story.
Thank you so much. This has been very enlightening, very delightful conversation, and thanks for coming on Friends at Work podcast.
Thank you very much for having me.
That's our episode for this week. Thanks for listening. Let's continue the conversation. You can reach me by email at myfriendtoye@gmail.com or on Facebook at Friends at Work podcast. And you can follow me on Twitter at Friends at Work US. Join me next time for another episode of Friends at Work podcast with Ade Toye. Bye for now.